A bloated body, bloody froth at the mouth, eyes rolled back in a fixed, inhuman stare, the stench of death mixed with incense in a palace drenched in fear. He collapsed mid-sentence, his fingers clenched around a game piece, while those around him froze. Unsure if it was a stroke, a seizure, or divine judgment, it was the grotesque final moment of Ivan IV of Russia, better known as Ivan the Terrible, a monarch whose name still echoes with dread. Today we reveal the disturbing truth behind his final descent, a story of disease, madness, murder, and one of the ugliest deaths ever to defile a throne. Born on August 25th, 1530, Ivan Vasilievich was crowned Tsar of all the Russias at the age of 16. He was the first to officially hold the title, elevating himself from prince to emperor, from man to demigod. At first, the boy Tsar showed signs of brilliance. He instituted reforms, drafted a legal code, and centralized power. But the seeds of madness had long been germinating. Ivan was orphaned young, starved of affection, and raised in a court of snakes. He watched nobles poison each other, betray their kin, and claw for control of the fragile throne. By the time he came of age, Ivan no longer trusted anyone. His paranoia would become his crown. He unleashed it in the form of the Oprichnina, a sadistic secret police that roamed the countryside clad in black, riding horses adorned with severed dog heads. They tortured, mutilated, and annihilated anyone deemed disloyal. Entire towns were slaughtered. Ivan watched these executions with perverse fascination, sometimes participating personally. He had become judge, jury, and executioner, and in the process, tore his own soul apart. But it wasn't only others he destroyed. Ivan's health began to unravel by his 40s. Years of stress, rage, and a cocktail of medications had taken their toll. His face became bloated, skin waxy and gray, his spine hunched and bones brittle. By his final decade, he looked less like a ruler and more like a rotting corpse propped up on silks and incense. Physicians of the day prescribed mercury for his ailments. Yes, mercury. The poison seeped into his tissues, triggering tremors, hallucinations, and excruciating abdominal pain. His teeth turned black, his hair thinned in clumps, his nails turned brittle and fell off. Witnesses wrote that his breath smelled like sulfur and rotting meat. When he stood, his joints cracked like dry twigs. When he moved, attendants winced at the stink of his sweat, a blend of decay, disease, and death. But nothing compared to the tragedy he inflicted on his own flesh and blood. In a fit of rage in 1581, Ivan beat his pregnant daughter-in-law for wearing immodest clothing. When his son, also named Ivan, confronted him, the Tsar struck him with an iron-tipped staff. The blow crushed his skull. The young man died days later, soaked in his father's tears and prayers. The grief never left him. Some say the moment he saw his son's brains spill onto the floor, the last of his sanity evaporated. After that, the Tsar became unrecognizable. Paranoia twisted into full-blown delusion. He believed demons haunted his chambers. He accused his closest aides of witchcraft. He forbade servants from touching his garments. Food was pre-tasted. Floors were scrubbed hourly. And yet, his body deteriorated faster than anyone could comprehend. He suffered from advanced osteophytes, bony growths, that left his vertebrae jagged and fused. Every step was agony. His legs swelled with fluid. He likely suffered multiple strokes, leaving him partially paralyzed and drooling. His skin erupted in pustules. His fingers curled inward like claws. And through it all, he clung to the throne with the desperation of a drowning man. In his final months, the royal palace in Moscow became a mausoleum. Curtains were drawn, candles lit during the day. Priests whispered prayers outside his door. Servants burned incense by the sack to mask the unbearable odor emanating from the dying Tsar. But no incense could smother the smell of decay. The stench seeped into the walls, the tapestries, the very stone. On March 18th, 1584, while playing chess with a close aide, Ivan suddenly convulsed. He rose from his chair, grunted like an animal, then collapsed. Blood gushed from his nose. His body spasmed, foamed, then went still. Those present dared not move. The Tsar was feared even in death. And yet, the horror didn't end there. Ivan's corpse swelled rapidly. His skin turned purple and green. Rigor mortis set in, but decomposition raced ahead. Within hours, his abdomen split, releasing foul gases and a black ichor that soaked through the floorboards. The smell was indescribable, acrid, sour, meaty, infernal. Embalmers worked in panicked silence, plugging orifices with wax, stuffing the bloated body with herbs and cloth, wrapping it tightly to prevent explosion during procession. But still the gases leaked. During the funeral, attendees gagged into their sleeves. Some fainted. Others claimed they saw the corpse's eyes flutter, possibly post-mortem muscle spasms, possibly mass hysteria. His body was buried in the Cathedral of the Archangel in Moscow. But even then, Ivan would not rest. Years later, when his tomb was opened by Soviet researchers, they found alarming levels of mercury and arsenic in his remains, confirming that the Tsar had likely been slowly poisoned by his own doctors. The legacy he left behind was a broken, paranoid empire. His surviving son Fyodor was feeble-minded, incapable of ruling. After Fyodor's death, Russia plunged into chaos, a period known as the Time of Troubles, marked by famine, civil war, and foreign invasion. The vacuum left by Ivan's death would almost consume the nation. The Russia he left behind was a scorched cathedral of paranoia. Ivan had reigned for over 50 years, half a century of bloodletting, betrayal, and cruelty so creative it seemed biblical. He had hollowed out the nobility, turned the boyar class into either executioners or corpses, and left an entire population unsure whether to kneel in worship or crawl away in horror. From the ruins of his bloodline rose impostors and tyrants, pretenders and cannibals. False Dimitris, claiming to be his long-dead son, cropped up like specters, each more deranged than the last. Foreign armies invaded. Starvation and mass death became ordinary. It was as if the devil Ivan had danced with in life was now demanding full payment in corpses. And yet, beneath the rot, something else lingered. Something far more dangerous than decay. Myth. To some, Ivan was not a demon, but a protector, a necessary evil, a man who had crushed the Mongols, expanded Russian borders, and forged an empire through fire and steel. He had broken the boyars who choked Russia's throat. He had centralized power. He had created the model for absolute autocracy, the Tsar as both man and God. A horrifying vision, yes, but effective. Centuries later, the echo of Ivan's methods would resonate in the cold offices of Joseph Stalin, another man of steel, another ruler who knew that fear was the strongest mortar for building empires. Stalin reportedly admired Ivan, even commissioning a film that portrayed him as a tragic hero, misunderstood, betrayed, and ultimately justified in his cruelty. The film's second part, which touched on Ivan's descent into paranoia, was quickly censored. Too close to home, Ivan had turned Russia into a realm where power was not given, but seized and defended with blood. He had built a throne atop skulls and dared anyone to challenge him. That lesson was not lost on future tyrants. He taught Russia how to kneel and how to kill. The Orthodox Church, which Ivan had manipulated with both piety and threat, eventually canonized some of his victims as martyrs. But there was always a stain on the altar, and that stain bore the shape of Ivan's hand. To this day, the legacy of Ivan the Terrible remains split in two. A dark monument where some see a sword and others see a shadow. In 2016, Russia unveiled the first statue of Ivan in over 400 years in the city of Ariel. The debate surrounding it was fierce. Some called it a disgrace, others a reclamation. Some saw history, Others saw a warning, but the statue stands because that is the true legacy of Ivan the Terrible, not just the deaths he caused or the empire he built, but the terrifying idea that cruelty can be effective, that madness can be rationalized if it comes in the name of statehood, and that absolute power, even when wielded by a lunatic, can be worshipped like a god. He didn't just kill people, he changed the DNA of a nation, and in that perhaps lies the most grotesque legacy of all.